You said first hostages released on Sunday in phase one, but can you break down the three phases for us and what's exactly in each?
Sure thing. So phase one is 42 days long, and it has a couple of different components. On the one hand, Hamas will release 33 hostages. They won't release them all at once. They'll start the process on Sunday and then continue it throughout the 42-day period. At the same time, Israel has promised to withdraw its forces from several key positions inside Gaza, the Netzarim corridor that cuts through the middle of Gaza, other parts of the territory, and will withdraw its military to parts of a so-called buffer zone around the exterior of the Gaza territory. At the same time, Israel will release a number of Palestinian prisoners, many of whom will be allowed to return to Gaza, and of course there will be a cessation of hostilities. Israeli bombing inside Gaza will cease. After 16 days in phase one, negotiations and discussions will begin for the implementation of phase two. Phase two will see the release of additional hostages. Hamas will have about 60 additional hostages to release. Some of them are alive, some of them are dead. It's not clear how many. Israel will release additional Palestinian prisoners, withdraw from the territory. If those negotiations are successful, there will also be a phase three, which in theory will produce a permanent ceasefire. Now, as I mentioned, Netanyahu is saying something very different behind the scenes. He's telling his supporters and those within his government that there won't be a permanent ceasefire, that the war will continue. And I think the key to that will be Trump. If President Trump, if his administration supports Netanyahu, gives him the green light to continue the war, possibly after the first phase, I think it's very likely that the ceasefire will fall apart.
And if all of the hostages are released, would Netanyahu and Israel continue this war to completely get rid of Hamas then?
Yes. So the key there is, will there be hostages left in the territory? Hamas really only has one source of leverage, and that is the hostages. And the Hamas negotiating position has been to retain hostages, to keep them inside Gaza until there is a permanent ceasefire, until there are guarantees in place from the U.S., from Arab nations such as Qatar and Egypt, that will prevent the fighting to continue. Only then will Hamas agree to release all of the hostages. So it is a question, will Israel return to war even if there remain hostages inside the territory? As I mentioned, Netanyahu is saying that it will. While he's promising to release the hostages, at the same time, the way these deals are phased out, if the war does continue, there likely will be hostages remaining inside Gaza.
You and I have been talking about hostage release and ceasefire negotiations now for at least a year. And can you talk to us specifically about how these phases look compared to the May 2024 deal, and why, if it looks so familiar and so similar, why now? What has changed to agree to it now?
Well, you're absolutely right. The deal in its structure, the deal in its framework, in its phasing, looks very similar to a deal that the Biden administration put together in May of last year that Hamas reportedly agreed to. Now, we should note that Hamas's position has changed. At various points between now and May, they have moved their position on which prisoners they want released, which parts of Gaza they want the IDF, the Israeli military, to withdraw from. But Hamas is more or less stuck by the May 2024 position. The key change has been in Netanyahu's position. Netanyahu put up a pretty strong front last year. He pushed back against U.S. pressure to make concessions on withdrawing Israeli forces from Gaza. He insisted on a mechanism that would sort of manage the flow of people inside Gaza into North Gaza. And then he dug in his heels and he didn't retreat from that position. Now, there are questions as to why he did that. It's entirely possible that he did so because he was calculating that he could get a better deal under Trump if Trump won the election. And that is what happened. Trump won the election, and as soon as Trump became involved in the negotiations through his envoy, Steve Witkoff, we saw a change in Netanyahu's position. Did he yield to pressure from Trump, or did he simply change his position, confident of the fact that he would get support from Trump later on? I should note that, for Netanyahu, Gaza is just one of many issues that he is looking to the U.S. to provide support for. There are plans to expand Israeli settlements in the West Bank. There are plans to, further weaken Hezbollah in Lebanon, potentially enforce an Israeli position in Syria. Israel obviously has great concerns about Iran's nuclear program, and Netanyahu is looking for support from the U.S. there. So it's possible that Netanyahu did this as an olive branch to Trump to ensure greater U.S. support moving into the future. Those are the reasons that I would point to as to why there was a change now rather than 6 months ago.